Hi, this is Naomi with Sword and Steel, and today I am going to be assembling, including magnetization, for all variants of the T-34 76 Soviet tank for bolt action. Before we start the video though, I really want to say thank you to the YouTube members and patrons that support the channel financially. I really appreciate the support. I just had a recent malfunction of one of the lapel mics for our battle report, so I grabbed a new one, and thank you for allowing me to do so and continuing videos in this manner. So thank you to everyone who is on this list. And if you wanted to support the channel as well, you can find all the information on how to do that in the description. I really appreciate it if you do, and you can. So let's get to it then. This bolt action model of the T-34-76 tank can build 3 different variants: the T-34-76 OBR 1941, the T-34-76 OBR 1942, and the T-34-76 OBR 1943. Though looking at the bolt action model, it doesn't look like it particularly matters rules-wise which variant you choose, though you will be able to attach a flamethrower to turn it into the OT 3476 instead, should you wish to. But in this video, rather than choosing one of the variants to build, I am going to magnetize my tank so I can build any of the variants that I want, depending on the model I want for a particular game. And since few T-34s, if any, were painted with camo due to the speed at which they were produced and sent out into the battlefield, when I paint this, I'll just be using the standard Soviet green paint scheme for all variants. I also don't need to worry about which main gun to attach because there is only one, the F-34. Though the earlier version of the T-34, the 1940 variant, had the L-11 tank gun, all of the variants here, the 1941, 1942, and 1943, share the harder hitting, though shorter ranged, F-34 tank gun. The overall construction of this model is fairly simplistic compared to some of the other bolt action models, with fewer smaller pieces to worry about, though that seems to fit really well for the lore of the T-34, doesn't it? Since they really wanted to put these guys out fast, and they too simplified the design and manufacturing of them, so it suits. But if you are going to magnetize the turrets and the guns like I have, you'll want to take great heed in how you put it together. Or you could watch this video and just do as I do. And since there is no numbering system to these sprues, you'll just have to pay attention to the guide and probably dry fit to find out exactly where each piece is supposed to go before using what I would suggest extra thin plastic cement, which works really well for any plastic kit. Not resin or metal kits, but for plastic kits, I very much enjoy cement. Not the thicker plastic cement, the extra thin variant for this kind of work. So to magnetize the turrets, you will want to magnetize the gun itself first. I used the magnets I had, which were 2 sizes in total, the 3mm and 5mm ones in diameter with a thickness of 1mm. You'll find these sizes in the packages of magnets that the army painter sells, and Warlord Games themselves sometimes has magnets and non-magnet tweezers combined set that have similar sized magnets you could use as well. I did have to score out the inside of the gun a little to fit the 5mm magnet within so that the gun would fit snugly against the turret options, or against the mantlet, I suppose. And then I added the magnet and filled in the gun with AK Interactive's grey putty, ideal for this kind of job. After it dried, I shaved away the excess of the putty and made sure the gun still fits snugly to its mantlet. Now, thankfully, the mantlet has a spot so you could see exactly where the gun is supposed to fit. The 1941 turret has the single hatch, and its pieces, which are unique from the other 2 variants, can be glued together so that the gun can settle against this completely glued turret. I used the magnet within the gun to hold in place the magnet that has to go inside the turret. This would ensure the perfect placement of the turret's magnet, as well as a quick method to make sure that all turrets have the correct polarization. Now, the other two turrets for the 1942 and the 1943 variants were a little more complicated. You are going to want to assemble the gun mantlet separate from the turret because you only get one for these two variants, so you'll need to switch it out and have it as a separate magnetized piece. And as before, the magnetized gun allows you to situate the magnet inside that mantlet exactly where it needs to be for a great fit. And while all of that was drying, I got to work on building the chassis of the tank. Now, the assembly guide suggests to attach the tracks to the wheels first, and then attach the tracks to the hull. I do not suggest that. Due to how the wheels connect to the hull, I would suggest first attaching the wheels to the hull and then attaching the tracks to the wheels because you can line everything up much easier that way. And remember, when using extra thin plastic cement, you can easily use just a little of the plastic glue to put everything into place. And then after you have everything where you want it, you can go back and use more extra thin plastic cement to add a firmer attachment to everywhere that you originally glued. It's a really nice thing about the extra thin plastic cement. You can use it during and after to really firm up the connection of every piece and to remove any join lines that you don't want there, though for a tank you really don't care that much about join lines, I would imagine, since it's a manufactured vehicle and join lines are par for the course. Now that we're on to the top part of the chassis, which is one solid piece with lots of flat areas, I thought maybe I should mention how to avoid gouging your plastic with your hobby knife. You do absolutely want to clean off the excess bit of sprue that you'll have after cutting your model away from its sprue. Bring it down as close as possible with your hobby knife and then turn your hobby knife over and start scraping it away just as you would with a mold line mover or like a file. And this allows a lot more control to scrape far less away and can avoid gouging, particularly over curves, but it works really well for straight lines as well. The only place I imagine it wouldn't work is if something had a whole lot of texture, and that might cause you to scrape more than you need of the texture. But for flat surfaces and for curves, turning over your hobby knife or grabbing a mold line remover, whichever you prefer, it really seems to work the same sort of way. That would be how I would get rid of that last tiny couple of millimeters or less, fractions of millimeters of the plastic without gouging too far into the plastic. Not that it particularly matters for this tank because nothing's going to have been perfectly created in a very fast going factory. So just think of it as your unique tank having wear on it because the manufacturers accidentally banged it around a bit too much. Or it happened to have hit a tree while it was driving through a battlefield. You really don't have to worry too much about these tanks. They were tough stuff and they went through a lot. So if there's some wear on your tank or some gouging and irregularities, that's all the more realistic in the long run. Now at this point, I'm checking to see what I need to do to magnetize the Hull MG and the flamethrower. First, cut away the insert on the machine gun and on the flamethrower so that they have a flat surface for which I can add their magnets to. Then I drilled a hole through the chassis that is the same size as the magnets to be used on them. Then I shaved away on the inside of the chassis so I could fit my 5mm magnet in that crevice. And then I glued it in place, and because I was impatient, I used accelerant to make the super glue dry faster. When you use this, make sure to place it next to the super glue and let it flow into the glue rather than dabbing it directly onto the glue and messing up your brush. After making sure my polarization is correct, I add a magnet to the back of the machine gun. Don't add too much glue. At this point, you can add more glue once you have it in place. Center it as much as possible, and make sure to let the pieces dry away from each other. Impatience and magnetization go very poorly together. After those have dried, I'll check their fit and shave away any excess glue that may keep the pieces from attaching together smoothly. This may happen multiple times over with any place that has a very tight fit, so just keep your hobby knife handy and carve away as you like. It's very simple to get super glue off of the plastic once it is dried. Now that that part is done and I'm satisfied with it, we can go back to the turrets and I clear away any excess plastic putty. And now it is time to add the last 2 magnets to the last 2 turrets. Just like before, I'm using the magnetization already done in the gun and in the mantlet to ensure that the magnet is in the correct place for the turret itself and with the correct direction of polarization. And you just have to be a little careful by making sure you don't add too much super glue to the back of your turret, because you don't want the super glue to spill into those slots that the mantlet will attach to and accidentally glue your mantlet to one of your turrets. So just be careful. So after all that had dried, I checked the fitting of everything and saw that there really was no need to magnetize the top of the 3 turrets to the bottom bit, since gravity will keep each one in place just fine. If you wanted to do so, then I'd suggest using plastic card for that, or a piece of sprue going across the hole for your magnets to adhere to. And if you do really want to see that done, just comment below and I'll see about putting a short video solely on using plastic card or sprue bits to do so. But I personally saw no need to add to the work involved, since they sit like fitted hats already. Since that was decided, I could place the top of the chassis on the bottom of it now and glue the 2 pieces together, smoothing out joins with extra plastic glue and attaching the auxiliary fuel tanks to the back of the tank, since it would feel terribly silly to have to leave your tank behind for lack of fuel. Actually, the amount of these tanks that were simply abandoned during the war because of malfunctions and lack of proper communication really was unfortunate. I did find that one of the turrets had a rough gap, likely due to a little warp in the plastic that I couldn't leave alone. So I added a little plastic putty to the gap and smoothed it down, and when that had dried, just even it up with the back of my hobby knife. I like to imagine it was welded a little roughly at that place, but will probably be completely invisible once the paint and wear go on anyway. The last thing to do was add the extra piece of track storage compartments to the tank and the hatches on the turrets. Now, like I said, the 1941 turret only has a single hatch and you only need one. But on the 1942 and 1943 turrets, there are 2 hatches, fondly called Mickey Mouse hatches, and you only get 2, or 3 if you count the open one with the commander. But if you're magnetizing, you need 4, and you only get 2. So I just used the 2 and magnetized them. I glued 5mm magnets into the openings, and again, making sure my polarization is correct, I glue 3mm magnets to the bottom of the hatches. Whenever you want to change hatches from one turret to the other, just use magnets to pop them off again. There are 2 sizes of compartments, short and taller, and you can put them on either place that you like. As for the extra piece of rack, there's no exact guide as to where it's supposed to go, so I put it on where it looked the most correct. One last thing to note is that you will find on your sprue a small piece that has no home on this tank. I'm not fully certain what it is. It looks too small to be an antenna and too big for a machine gun, but it doesn't have a spot anywhere on the tank that I can see anyway. It isn't visible in any of the photos of the real T-34-76s, nor in the painted models on the box. So it's a mystery to me. Just thought I'd mention it in case any of you came to watch this video solely to find out where it went, in which case I'm very sorry for the disappointment. I don't think it belongs on this tank. So this is the 1941 variant of the T-34-76 with a coaxial turret-mounted machine gun, which for those not familiar with its placement is replicated in this model by those tiny holes left of the main gun, as well as our little forward-facing hull-mounted machine gun and, of course, the big F-34 tank gun. This one, on the other hand, is the 1942 T-34-76 with the earlier one-man turret replaced with a more hexagonal 2-hatch turret that reminded people of Mickey Mouse's ears when the hatches were open. This 1942 variant certainly could play as a 1943 because by all accounts there were so many differences between each T-34-76 and making the magnetization process faster and simpler. And this is the T-34-76 OBR 1943, which I included the flamethrower on. So technically, it is the OT-34-76, or let me try to brutalize the name for a moment, Magnetization, or flamethrowing tank, which is, from what I saw on the card, the only actual functional difference in the bolt action game that you need to worry about rules-wise. Well, thanks for watching. Make certain to like if you enjoyed the video. It's just a little button down there somewhere if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video and want to see something like this out there. I do all sorts of videos in the miniature hobby relating area. And hit the bell notification if you want to know as soon as I put out any video. I will catch you in the next video, and make certain if you had any questions whatsoever, you comment below for them because you might not be the only one asking that question. So I will catch you in the next one. Bye! Okay, for those who have made it all the way to the end, hi! I absolutely could not find the silly army painter drill, and of course I found it later, but at the time I wasted no more time and just drilled with the bit itself, and you know, it works. Not necessarily what I would suggest, but it works.